The air in Tupelo was thick with the humid heat of a southern summer, the kind that clung to your skin like a second layer. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the only sounds were the distant hum of a generator and the occasional crow cawing from a nearby tree. But this wasn't just any day in Tupelo, Mississippi. This was the day Elvis Presley was born. Elvis Aaron Presley came into the world on January 8, 1935, in a tiny two-room shack on the wrong side of the railroad tracks. The house was so small that the whole family, Elvis, his parents Gladys and Vernon, and his stillborn twin brother, Jesse, shared a single bedroom. The living room doubled as a kitchen, and there was a small laundry room where they did their washing. It was a simple life, but it was all they had. The birth itself wasn't without its share of tragedy. Elvis's twin brother, Jesse, was stillborn, and the loss cast a shadow over the family. But little Elvis, with his big, curious eyes and his tousled black hair, brought a glimmer of hope. His mother, Gladys, held him close, her heart swelling with a love that would only grow stronger over the years. Tupelo was a town where everyone knew everyone else's business. The Presleys were no exception. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, had a knack for getting into trouble. He had been in and out of jail, and the family struggled to make ends meet. They were poor, but they were also proud. They attended Assembly of God Church, where Elvis would later find solace in the powerful gospel music that would shape his future. Despite the hardships, the Presleys were a tight-knit family. Elvis's mother, Gladys, was his rock. She doted on him and he adored her. She was a strong woman, but she had her moments of vulnerability. The loss of Jesse had left a deep wound, and she often spoke of how she wished things could have been different. Elvis's father, Vernon, was a hard worker but a dreamer. He had a job at the local cotton gin, but it didn't pay much. He often talked about the day when things would get better, when they would have a better house, a better life. Elvis listened to these stories, and they planted a seed of hope in his young heart. The town of Tupelo itself was a place of contrasts. On one side of the tracks, there were neat, well-kept homes and businesses. On the other side, where the Presleys lived, the houses were shabby, and the streets were unpaved. But even in this part of town, there was a sense of community. Neighbors helped each other out, and everyone knew each other's names. Elvis grew up listening to the music of the South Gospel, blues, and country. He would often sing along with the radio, and his mother would smile, knowing that her little boy had a special gift. But life was tough, and there were times when they didn't have enough food to eat. Elvis would help his father with odd jobs, and he learned the value of hard work from a young age. One day, when Elvis was just a boy, he saw a guitar in the window of a local hardware store. It was a simple instrument, but it captivated him. He begged his father to buy it, and after much pleading, Vernon finally agreed. It was a moment that would change Elvis's life forever. As Elvis grew older, he began to perform at local events and gatherings. His voice was powerful, and his presence on stage was magnetic. People started to take notice, and soon Elvis Presley was not just a boy from Tupelo, but a rising star. But the road to fame was not an easy one. The Presleys faced many challenges, and Elvis's success came with its own set of problems. The fame, the fortune, and the pressure to perform took a toll on the family. Elvis's mother, Gladys, struggled to adapt to the fast-paced world of show business, and the distance between them grew. Despite the challenges, Elvis never forgot his roots. He would often sneak back to Tupelo, driving an old brown Dodge, just to be close to the place where he grew up. But the town had changed, and so had he. The simple life he once knew was now a distant memory, a bittersweet reminder of a time when things were simpler. The signs leading to Elvis's birthplace are a testament to the impact he had on Tupelo. Today, the house where he was born stands as a shrine to his memory. It has been moved from its original location to a more accessible spot, but the stories of the people who knew him remain. They remember the boy who sang gospel songs in church, the young man who dreamed big, and the star who never forgot where he came from. In the heart of Tupelo, the legacy of Elvis Presley lives on. His music, his spirit, and his story continue to inspire generations. But in those early days, in that tiny two-room shack, it was just a family struggling to make ends meet, a mother's love and a boy's dream. He got offended when he saw people misusing funds. When he returned to Tupelo in 1956 and 1957 for the fairs, he used his own money to buy back the swimming pool, the ballpark, and a youth center. But sometimes things didn't go as planned. He wanted to build a guitar-shaped swimming pool, but the funds were misused again. Those were incredible days, and everyone who was around then, or who wished they were, had a story to tell. Robert Norris, a young policeman at the time, had a wild one. He was assigned to supervise the event, and ended up dragging kids off the stage. They brought Elvis to the fairground at 10 in the morning with sirens blaring. The kids swarmed his Cadillac, and there was no show that morning, so they brought him back at 2 p.m., and we had to come back that night. Norris was only 24, and his chief in his 50s didn't understand the kind of crowd Elvis would attract. Norris suggested they bring a fire hose, but his chief said no. At 11 at night, Norris got a call saying they were needed at the fairground at 1 a.m. sharp. There were 14 policemen on site, but the noise and excitement of the crowd were overwhelming. "I've never heard such screaming," Norris said. When it came to the afternoon show, it was clear that 14 policemen weren't enough, so Governor J.R. Coleman called in the National Guard. The National Guard, usually used to quell political demonstrations and race riots, couldn't stop a girl named Julie Hopper from being pushed onto the stage. The event made national headlines. Elvis talked to her, but no one heard what he said. Elvis was already a local hero, and even the policemen knew him. Robert Norris, who wore overalls just like Elvis did in old pictures, said Elvis was obsessed with the police and even became an honorary deputy later on. Even then, Elvis had a reputation for being generous, but Presley people were proud and wouldn't accept handouts. The First Assembly of God Church in Tupelo celebrates the boy Elvis. Old-timers who knew him as a kid saw the man he would become. One of those old-timers is Azalea Smith-Moore, a psychologist who grew up with Elvis. She remembers him as a kind, warm youngster who gave gifts to local people, even those who weren't his close friends. Elvis's early home life was tough. His father, Vernon, was in and out of prison, and his mother, Gladys, struggled to keep the family together. Azalea thinks the troubles at home contributed to Elvis's later issues. Vernon's absence came at the worst time. "Separation and anxiety are hard on a child and his mother," she said. Elvis and Gladys were evicted from their home because they couldn't keep up with payments. They lived in tiny shotgun houses. Despite the hardships, Azalea sees Elvis as a hero for the people of Tupelo. She and Elvis stayed friends while growing up, playing together and swapping comic books. Guy Thomas Harris, who helped refurbish I Assembly of God Church, says Elvis called him his little brother. Harris showed me photos of Elvis with a group of friends from 70 years ago. "We were all poor," Harris said. "It was hard to come up with $100. People were trying to make enough to buy a house and put food on the table." Tupelo was a town of broken dreams and broken marriages. Harris and Elvis were both affected by their parents' absences. "We were a close-knit group," Harris said. "We played together, explored the woods, and helped each other out." Elvis and his friends played unconventional games, like pretending to be telephone men, stringing wires from house to house. "It was a simple life, but we had good, happy memories," Azalea said. Tupelo wasn't just farm country. It was also red clay hills where kids rode and played. The town was divided, with East Tupelo being the working class area and Tupelo proper being for professionals. The black community was also divided, with areas called the Hill and Across the Tracks. Billy Welch, who lived across the tracks from Elvis, remembered him as fun and musical. "We picked cotton together and made $1 each. In class, he'd play the guitar and we'd sing." James Osborne, another friend, recalled Elvis's interest in girls and their love for black music on Green Street. Elvis was just a normal kid in overalls, but he had big dreams. His early life in Tupelo shaped him into the man who would become a legend. But for those who knew him, he was always just Elvis, the boy from the other side of the tracks. Elvis Presley's school days in Tupelo, Mississippi, were a mix of typical boyhood adventures and the early signs of his future stardom. Jimmy Galt, one of Elvis's childhood friends, remembered a particular day when Elvis got into a fight at school. The teacher took both boys to the office, and the head asked who would go first. Both boys knew they were in for a good hiding, and the cries that echoed through the walls were a clear sign of the punishment to come. But most of the fun happened outside of school. Jimmy would ride his bike to Elvis's house, carrying his saxophone. They would spend Friday nights together, and sometimes Elvis's dad, Vernon, would take them on his grocery delivery round. One time, Vernon asked Jimmy to help unload a case of cabbages, warning him to be careful so they wouldn't spoil if they hit the floor. It was these simple, everyday moments that created lasting memories. Billy Welch, another friend, had a business idea. They planned to pick plums and sell them on the street, but they ended up eating all the plums before they could make any money. It was a typical childhood adventure, filled with good intentions and not so great follow-through. Elvis's mom, Gladys, was known for her cooking and her ghost stories. Jimmy Gault once stayed at the Presley house and remembered Gladys's storytelling, leading to one of them sleepwalking. He couldn't remember if it was him or Elvis, but it added to the quirky and fun atmosphere of their friendship. Despite the poverty that many of the children in Tupelo faced, there was a sense of community and shared struggles. Jimmy Gault recalled that out of a class of 120, 7 millionaires and a billionaire emerged. It was a remarkable achievement, especially considering that many of the children, including Elvis, often didn't have more than one shirt to wear. Jimmy himself had only one pair of shoes and 2 pairs of pants, but he and his friends were content, not realizing how poor they were. The Great Depression and a devastating tornado in 1936 had made life even harder for the families in Tupelo. Many parents worked in factories or mills, and the town's forward-thinking approach led to the construction of a new hospital in 1935, which became a source of pride for the community. Elvis's friends, like Billy Welch and Guy Thomas Harris, were genuinely happy for his success. They didn't feel jealousy. Instead, they were thrilled to see their friend achieve fame. Elvis's cousin, Charlene Presley, described the family's poverty as pathetic, but it was a shared experience that brought them closer together. One of the most significant moments in Elvis's early life was his first encounter with a guitar. At the age of 10, he and his mother, Gladys, went to the Tupelo hardware store to buy a bike. Elvis saw a rifle, but Gladys wouldn't let him have it. Instead, the store manager, Forrest Bobo, showed him a guitar. Elvis was immediately drawn to it and decided to buy it. The store manager, Howard Height, now tells this story to visitors, sharing the moment that music history began. Gladys was a strong and loving influence in Elvis's life. She worked hard to provide for her family, cooking beans and greens, and making cornbread and bacon for breakfast. The Presleys' home was often cold, especially in winter, but they made the best of what they had. Faith and community were central to their lives, and Gladys's determination to give her son a better future was a driving force. Elvis's first public performance was at a talent show, sponsored by the Baker Company. He sang Old Shep a cappella, climbing onto a stool to reach the microphone. Despite the promoter's request not to sing that song, Elvis chose it anyway. He won 2 tickets to the show, and the audience's response was a clear indication of his potential. Historian Roy Turner, a native of Tupelo, remembers the impact Elvis had on the town. When Elvis returned to perform in 1956, he was nervous about playing for his hometown crowd. He wanted to make them proud and avoid disappointing his parents, who had lived on the wrong side of the tracks. The concert was a significant event, and the town treated Elvis like royalty. Elvis's early experiences, from the talent shows to his friendships, shaped him into the icon he became. His connection to Tupelo remained strong, and the town continued to celebrate his legacy. For the people of Tupelo, Elvis was more than just a famous musician. He was a son of the town, a symbol of what could be achieved with hard work and a little bit of luck. Elvis's early days in Tupelo were filled with music, friendship, and the simple joys of childhood. Sam Bell, one of Elvis's closest friends, often reminisced about their shared love for Western movies. They would watch films at the Lyric Theater, and then act out the scenes at home with their BB guns, pretending to be cowboys. Elvis was always enthusiastic, and even when he accidentally shot a blackbird, he was quick to stop, showing a sense of responsibility that was rare for a boy his age. Despite the racial segregation that was prevalent in the South, Sam and Elvis's friendship seemed to transcend those barriers. They would go to the same drugstores, play together, and even visit a black church to listen to gospel music. Sam remembered how Elvis would sing to a broom, pretending it was a guitar, and how he dreamed of being a gospel singer. "Man, he played that broom all the way to the top," Sam said with a chuckle, reflecting on Elvis's determination and passion. Elvis's love for music was also nurtured at the Lyric Theater, where he and his friends would gather to watch cowboy films and enjoy each other's company. James Osborne, another close friend, recalled how they would ride their bikes to the theater, with Elvis often perched on the handlebars. They shared a deep bond and a common love for the same kind of music and movies. Food was another important part of Elvis's life in Tupelo. He and his friends would often visit Johnny's Drive-In, a local hangout where they would indulge in burgers and donuts. Osborne remembered how Elvis would hum songs while they ate, always lost in his own world of music. The Drive-In still stands today, a testament to the simple pleasures of those times. A plaque outside commemorates Elvis's visits, though it doesn't fully capture the significance of the place in shaping his love for food and music. At school, Elvis was a quiet and reserved boy, often seen inside while others played outside. His classmates described him as shy and introverted, but he was always drawn to music. Azalea, another former classmate, recalled how Elvis would sing Old Shep, so often that it became a running joke. Despite his shyness, he had a deep love for poetry and classical elements, which he learned from his teachers. Miss Grimes, his fifth-grade teacher, was a significant influence, often drilling him and other students in multiplication tables to help them succeed. Elvis's family life was marked by financial struggles, but his parents always made sure he had presents, even if it meant going without themselves. The guitar he received from the hardware store was just one of the many gifts that showed how much his parents cared. Don Winders, another classmate, remembered how Elvis had a wagon for collecting groceries and other items, which was accidentally broken by a truck driver. The driver, feeling guilty, paid for the repairs, a small act of kindness that made a big difference to the young Elvis. Elvis's early romances were also part of his life in Tupelo. He had a girlfriend named Elwa Sandifer, whom he later dumped for a girl named Magdalene Morgan. These relationships, though young and innocent, were an important part of his social life and personal growth. Azalea noted that such relationships were encouraged at the time, helping kids develop comfort zones and lasting friendships. Despite his shyness, Elvis was not seen as a sissy. He participated in typical boy activities like swimming and hunting, and his classmates remembered him as a nice and disciplined kid. His introversion, however, set him apart from the more outgoing boys. Azalea believed that this introversion was a key part of his personality, shaping his approach to music and life. The influence of his teachers, especially Miss Grimes, was profound. She pushed her students to excel, drilling them in multiplication tables and instilling a sense of responsibility. This environment of care and challenge helped shape Elvis and his classmates, fostering a strong sense of loyalty to their school and community. Elvis's first appearance on stage, reciting the line, "My name is Fear, people tremble and shake when I am near," was a foreshadowing of the impact he would have on the world. It was a small but significant moment in the life of a boy, who would go on to become one of the most influential musicians of all time. Don shared a story that painted a vivid picture of how tight-knit the small Mississippi town was. It was a place where everyone knew everyone, and mentioning a name left no room for doubt. One day, Winder recounted a moment from his school days that highlighted Miss Grimes's unique teaching style. "She was a very smart lady," Winder said. "One day, Wayne Stevenson was poking me with a pencil, and I kept jumping. Miss Grimes left the room but watched from outside. I finally snapped and beat the devil out of Wayne, and she let me do it. The class cheered, and Elvis was among them." Shirley Gelentine, known as Shirley Jones to Elvis, was another classmate who remembered those days. "We sang a lot," Shirley recalled. "Elvis sang Old Shep all the time. We also went to the fair and sang in a contest." The day Elvis didn't win the talent show was a turning point in his life. There's a picture of Elvis with a look of disgust on his face, like he couldn't believe he didn't win, Shirley said. Despite the setback, Elvis kept singing, often in the chapel. "He was very shy, except when he was singing," Shirley added. It was surprising for her to see him become the most successful child from Tupelo. James Osborne, who knew Elvis for about 3.5 years, shared his own memories. His brother, Mississippi Slim, was a radio star who performed with Hank Williams. When Elvis wanted to join Slim's radio show, James asked Slim if he could perform. Slim said, "Yes, if he's good." Elvis sang Old Shep and God Bless My Daddy. Slim thought he needed more practice, but he let Elvis join the show anyway, James said. Later, Elvis sang at the Assembly of God Church, and James's brothers taught him guitar chords. "My brother said Elvis had a good voice but couldn't carry a tune," James recalled. When James returned from the Korean War, Elvis was already on his way to stardom, and Slim apologized for initially doubting him. Jimmy Galt, another classmate, remembered the musical discussions he had with Elvis. He even recalled a song Elvis wrote in class, a 4-line tune that had never been published or recorded. Jimmy sang it out loud, "City girl. She lives in a fine brick home, poor girl. She do the same but my girl. She lives in Tupelo County Jail, but it's a brick house all the same." The song captured the essence of life in Tupelo, where appearances could be deceiving. Elvis often brought his guitar to school, but he was only allowed to play once a week. Miss Grimes would listen as he strummed. Azalea, another former classmate, remembered Elvis's generosity, a trait he inherited from his uncle, Noah Presley. "Elvis was always generous, just like his uncle," Azalea said. When Elvis returned to Tupelo as a star, he didn't forget those who had been kind to him. "We all had a tremendous respect for our elders in Tupelo," Azalea noted. She believed Elvis's respect for authority figures like Colonel Parker stemmed from this upbringing. The Elvis Museum, a modernistic building near the birthplace, became a point of contention in Tupelo. Bill Kynard, who established the museum, faced opposition from the local government. "A man offered us $2 million to get out, but my wife said no," Bill said. The Kynards were determined to create a place where Elvis fans could pay tribute. They even planned a cemetery for fans, with a granite wall listing the names of those who had passed away. Despite the challenges, they managed to secure a place for themselves in the Presley legacy. Linda Kynard, Bill's wife, explained the museum's purpose. "I loved Elvis. His songs and his kindness mean everything to me. He bought groceries and medicines for people. His songs will stay with me forever," she said. The museum housed a pink Cadillac, one of Elvis's famous cars, and other memorabilia. The Kynards saw their project as a shrine to the star they admired so much. Charlie Watts, a former radio broadcaster, recalled interviewing Elvis and his parents when the singer returned to Tupelo in the 1950s. "Elvis was already known by his first name, just like Bing and Ella," Charlie said. Gladys and Vernon were proud of their son, and the town had a parade to celebrate his success. "Elvis was very humble and answered every question politely," Charlie remembered. He was disappointed when RCA issued the interview on an LP without his name or voice, but he believed Elvis would have been more considerate. Elvis's love for law enforcement was another interesting aspect of his personality. Robert Norris, a retired policeman, remembered how Elvis would often visit the police station in a police uniform. "We made him an honorary deputy because he was obsessed with being a police officer," Norris said. Steve Holland, a local assemblyman, reflected on Elvis's impact on Tupelo. "We are proud of our town and its history, but we can't deny that Elvis brought a lot of attention and prosperity here," Steve said. He hoped that visitors would spend more time in Tupelo, just as they did at Graceland. Elvis's legacy in Tupelo was a mix of pride, nostalgia, and a bit of resentment. The town had a rich history before Elvis, but his fame had transformed it in ways that were both positive and challenging. For many, Elvis remained a symbol of their community, a reminder of their roots and a source of endless memories. Steve Holland, a local musician and civic leader in Tupelo, Mississippi, has a dream. He wants to turn Tupelo into an Elvis Presley village, a destination that rivals Memphis in attracting Elvis fans from around the world. But he's frustrated. The state of Mississippi, he says, has never invested a dime in promoting Tupelo's Elvis legacy. With the right funding, Holland envisions a place where Elvis's memory lives on, not just through memorials and museums, but through a vibrant community that celebrates the king of rock and roll every day. Holland believes that if Elvis had lived longer, he would have transformed Tupelo in ways that go beyond music. Elvis would have implanted the culture of Elvis Presley here, and it would have gone round the world, Holland says. He thinks Elvis could have become a political figure, a spokesman for the South, much like Ronald Reagan or Sonny Bono. Holland has studied the Presleys all his life, and sees them as a family that took risks and didn't stand still. He believes Elvis would have made the South a better place. Linda Aliff, the sales director at the Tupelo Convention and Visitors Bureau, shares Holland's passion. She stands outside the local courthouse, a place deeply connected to Elvis's early days. This is where Elvis performed at a Saturday jamboree, a regular event where local talent showcased their skills. Linda describes the scene. Mississippi Slim, a local radio personality, introduced acts, but it was Elvis who stole the show. The young Elvis, who once chickened out at the last minute, finally found his courage and performed. From that day on, Mississippi Slim was no longer the star. Aliff also recalls Elvis's return visits to Tupelo in 1956 and 1957, when he performed at the Mississippi and Alabama Fair and Dairy Show. The crowds were so large that the governor had to bring in the National Guard to maintain order. It was a far cry from the small-town talent shows of his youth. Linda remembers Elvis as gorgeous and deeply connected to his roots in Tupelo, a place he never forgot. Charlene Presley, Elvis's cousin, takes me to the Priceville Memorial Garden, a somber place where Elvis would secretly visit at night. Here, he believed his stillborn twin, Jesse, was buried. Jesse was a constant presence in Elvis's life, even though he never lived. The grave is unmarked, a symbol of the poverty that once gripped the area. Despite this, Elvis's memory brings a sense of pride and rejuvenation to Tupelo. Susie Dent, of the Northeast Mississippi Historical and Genealogical Society, sums up the relationship between Elvis and Tupelo. When Elvis left here, he took some of Tupelo with him. Things stick in your heart and soul. Elvis's journey from Tupelo to Memphis is a story of ambition and transformation. But for many in Tupelo, he will always be their favorite son. In Memphis, the city that helped shape Elvis's career, his legacy is everywhere. Elvis Presley Boulevard, the Heartbreak Hotel, and the constant broadcasts of his music on Elvis Radio are reminders of his enduring impact. When the Presleys moved to Memphis in 1948, the city was a hub of music and culture. At Humes High School, where Elvis attended, his classmates recall him as a talented but unassuming student. Gene Bradbury, a former classmate, remembers Elvis's performances at school variety shows and the protection he received from Red West, a tough football player who became one of Elvis's closest friends. Memphis, with its rich musical heritage, provided the perfect backdrop for Elvis's rise to fame. The city's connection to Elvis is deep and enduring, and it continues to attract fans from around the world who come to experience the place where the king of rock and roll made his mark. For both Tupelo and Memphis, Elvis's legacy is a source of pride and a driving force for community and cultural development. Elvis's early days at Humes High School were marked by a mix of curiosity and tension. His flamboyant style and southern charm made him stand out, but not always in a good way. Jimmy Angel, a fellow alumnus who went on to sing with Elvis, recalled the school environment as tough. Humes was a tough school. Blacks weren't popular there. You could get your head handed to you, he said. Despite the challenges, Elvis made an impact. You couldn't miss him. He looked like a pimp, Angel remembered, noting that Elvis often wore a zoot suit and sang Your Cheat in Heart by Hank Williams. Elvis's ability to connect with others was evident in his friendship with George Klein, who became the unofficial leader of what would later be known as the Memphis Mafia. We bonded, George said, emphasizing the deep connection they shared. Elvis was very fortunate to have a friend in George Klein. He was a good cat, not a yes man. George also remembered producing the senior class talent show, where Elvis participated and won. I wondered whether he'd go anywhere in music, George admitted. The Presleys' move from Tupelo to Memphis was a significant change, both socially and economically. They were very poor, George recalled. Elvis himself had to adapt to a very big school. He was a quiet guy in high school. We called him the Velvet Hammer. Despite the difficulties, Elvis found ways to express himself. He was making a statement with his black pants with a white stripe or a black sport coat with the collar turned up, George noted. Elvis's interest in becoming a policeman was another interesting aspect of his high school days. Gene Bradbury and Fred Frederick remembered how Elvis admired the police. He just liked the police. He became a friend of a local sheriff, Bill Morris, Fred recalled. This admiration was partly due to the respect his parents, especially his father Vernon, had for law enforcement after Vernon's time in jail. Elvis's toughness and ability to take care of himself were also evident. He always carried a gun, Gene Bradbury revealed. He loved the idea of the power it gave him, although he never actually used the weapon. Instead, Elvis preferred gentler ways of persuasion. He was always a giving person, giving cars when he became an international success. He probably gave away as many as he kept, George Klein said. Lauderdale Courts, the apartment complex where the Presleys lived, became a significant part of Elvis's life. It was a family home, the first decent living quarters they had, explained a local resident. By all accounts, Gladys seems to have liked living there more than anywhere else, including Graceland. The residents of Lauderdale Courts, now in their 60s, gather every week to reminisce about the old days. They share stories about the young Elvis, who was just a neighbor and a friend back then. The apartment where the Presleys lived has been turned into a museum, attracting fans from all over. To the fans, this is a shrine, said a guide. They see their Elvis here. A woman dug up dirt and sold it on eBay. The historical significance of the place is inescapable. There's something here for every Elvis Presley fan, the guide added. Life at Lauderdale Courts was a mix of hardship and community. We were poor, but we didn't know we were poor, said Jack Barrelson. We had friends, good times together. We didn't fight and always helped each other. Blanche Gordon Scott, who walked with Elvis, recalled his early aspirations. Elvis had a plan to be an entertainer, she said. From the age of 13, he was working on that plan. He wanted to impress an audience right from the first minute. Buzzy Forbes, one of Elvis's friends, remembered the early days vividly. Every day we got up, we had fun. We didn't crack the books too well. We did a lot of partying. He recalled the first party they had in the apartment where Elvis lived. Paul Doer, Guy, Elvis, and me. Everyone in the Courts was friends, but us four were together all the time. Elvis's voice and talent were evident even then. It didn't take long to understand that Elvis Presley had a good voice, Buzzy said. Elvis was 13. The community at Lauderdale Courts was tight-knit, and everyone had a nickname. We knew each other, we fought together, we loved each other, Neil Niker said. Life in the Courts provided plenty of exercise. We played football, baseball in the parking lot. There were not many cars then. And yes, we got our exercise. We used to walk to the swimming pool, Neil recalled. Fred Frederick, who worked at the Rialto Cinema, often let his friends in for free. I let them all in and gave them popcorn, he remembered. Even Elvis worked as an usher at the Rialto for a time. Life at Lauderdale Courts was a blend of hardship and community, a place where a young Elvis Presley found his voice and his friends. The memories of those days are cherished by the residents, who continue to gather to remember the boy who became a legend. The Presley family's days at Lauderdale Courts were filled with the simple, everyday moments that shaped a community. Despite the hardships, there was a sense of belonging, a feeling that everyone was in it together. Vernon and Gladys Presley, along with their son Elvis, were just another family trying to make ends meet. But there was something special about Elvis, even back then. Elvis and his friends, like Buzzy Forbes and Ken Black, would do odd jobs to earn some money. They mowed lawns, delivered newspapers, and worked at the supermarket. It wasn't easy, but they found ways to enjoy life, whether it was going to the movies, the circus, or spending time at the gas station, where sometimes they'd pick up girls and have a good time. There were occasional fights, but those were rare. Elvis usually handled things better, as Buzzy Forbes remembered. The apartment at 185 Winchester was a humble place, but it was home. The furniture, like the lawnmower and Gladys's rocking chair, became iconic symbols of their life there. The radiogram, the electric fans, and the toy gun were all part of the story. The small victories, like winning a fairground prize, made life a bit more bearable. The community at Lauderdale Courts was a mix of different backgrounds, but everyone looked out for each other. Fred Frederick recalled that no matter whose door you knocked on, you'd always be welcomed with a meal, especially in an Italian house. Elvis's time at Humes High School was a turning point. Joining the Reserve Officers Training Corps, Rock gave him a chance to dress better and feel more confident. The uniform was the best clothes he had, and it made him stand out. Blanche Gordon Scott, who walked with Elvis to school every day, remembered his dreams and ambitions. He talked about making $1 million so his mom wouldn't have to work. They would listen to the Grand Ole Opry and dream of becoming country stars. Frederick and Elvis would go to bars and restaurants with jukeboxes, and Elvis would play his favorite songs, turning up his collar and enjoying the music. He never forgot his friends, even after he became famous. He would call them from his mansion, inviting them to the movies, fairgrounds, and even renting the whole fair for a night. The roller coaster rides were endless, and the sideburns, quiff, and swiveling hips became legendary. As the Presley family's fortunes changed, they moved to plusher homes, but the memories of Lauderdale Courts stayed with them. The community was a place where dreams were born and friendships were forged. Blanche Gordon Scott, who was close to Elvis for 6 years, shared her dreams with him. She told him about her business and the store she visited, which turned out to be Lansky's, a menswear store where Elvis would later buy his iconic outfits. Lansky's, now a high-end store in the Peabody Hotel, is a testament to the connection between Elvis and the Lanskys. The shop is filled with guitars, blue suede shoes, and portraits of Elvis. The Lanskys, Bernard and his son Hal, were more than just clothiers. They were part of Elvis's story. They gave him the clothes he needed to look the part, and he gave them a piece of his legend. The store is a shrine to the king, with labels on every item reminding you of the Presley connection. The Lanskys, with their thick Southern accents and Yiddish phrases, are a unique part of the Elvis legacy. Elvis's journey from the humble Lauderdale Courts to the heights of fame is a story of hard work, community, and the power of dreams. The memories of those days are still alive, preserved in the hearts of those who knew him, and in the places he called home.